pigeon 1-year-old, Mishkal Shmir B'Trim. Okay? So in other words, obviously, this was not like a normal situation. So the might say again, the gnat had grown so large that literally was the size of this small bird. It had a beak of brass and literally again like tziparnav means like nails of iron. Kavamayis. So now when Tzavos says obviously again not a normal creature, a miracle from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kiava Kamayis, when Titus was about to die, Amrlahu, he said to his attendants, Likal Yualahu Gavra, Vali Badre Likimtme Ashev Yame. Do me a favor, when I die, burn my body, cremate me, and scatter my ashes amongst the 7 seas. Why? So that the Jewish God shouldn't be able to find me and go ahead and hold me accountable for my sins. So I say this is an incredible testament here. You see, Titus understood the power of God. Certainly, again, through this whole episode with the gnat that became a bird, he understood that he was going to have to stand judgment for his deeds. So he says, cremate me, scatter my ashes amongst the 7 seas, and therefore I won't be able to stand judgment. So what happens? So the Gemara says, Unkelos, so fine. So, good. So Unkelos, so I'll say, so that pauses there for just a moment. We'll see what happens with Titus in just a moment. Get ready for this. Unkelos bar Klonikus bar Achse de Titus hava. Unkelos was the nephew of Titus. We'll say, Unkelos. No, there's no one amazed by this, right? Unkelos, right? Unkelos. You know, he's in the Chumash, right? You know, small little commentary over there, right by the side of the Psukim, above Rashi. Unkelos was the nephew, ultimately, again, of Titus. So what happened? He wanted to convert. Azl Askula Titus Benegida. So what happens? So we'll say he decides, listen, what better way to make an informed decision than to go ahead and talk to my dead uncle, right? See what's happening in the afterlife, right? What's going on? So he raises up the spirit of Titus through some type of necromancer. So Amarle man chashibahu alma says, uncle, in the world to come, which nation is most important? Amarle Yisrael. So Tito says Klal Yisrael. In the afterlife in Olam Haba, so Klal Yisrael is the most important nation. Malid Bukibuhu. So he says, uncle, I'm thinking about converting. What do you think? Amarle Milayhu Nefishin V'Lamatzi L'Kaimunu. The truth is, there's a lot of laws these Jews have, and you're not going to be able to fulfill them. Right? Nothing like a good vote of confidence, right? In other words, right? The Jews, they have a lot of mitzvahs, a lot of Torah. You're not going to be able to be successful in joining them. But I'll tell you what you can do. Zil igri bahu alma v'havi yeresha. But I will tell you what is a good idea. Start up with them. Antagonize them. Because the way the world works, I will say, is those who antagonize the Jews are often catapulted to positions of power in this world. I'll say, what a tremendous statement, right? Sometimes the more anti-Semitic, the more following, the greater following, and the more power you have. Whoever afflicts the Jewish people becomes ahead. Amrlei, Dina dahu garva b'mai. So it says, now obviously Titus is also speaking from personal experience, right? Titus was terribly antagonistic to the Jewish people, and yet again he became one of the most powerful people in the world. So now Unkelos says to his uncle, tell me, what's happening to you in the afterlife? So Amrlei b'mai, top of Nuzayim, we'll say 57a. B'mai dipasek anafshe. So the truth is, they do to me what I did to myself. Remember again, what did Titus command? Titus said, cremate me and scatter my ashes. Kol yoma mikanshi lekitme v'dainile v'kalule umevadje hashev yami. So I'll say, what happens to me every single day? Every day they go ahead and literally cremate me, scatter my ashes, and then gather me back up, right? Scatter me amongst the, right? I should say it differently. Kol yoma mikanshi lekitume. They gather my ashes, judge me, and then incinerate me, cremate me again, and scatter me amongst the 7 seas. That's what they do to Titus every single day in the Olam HaEmes. Okay, so Unkelos still continuing his journey to try to figure out ultimately if he should convert. We'll say Nun Zayin 57a, third line down from the top. Ozla Askila Bilam Benegide. So now Unkelos raises the spirit of Bilam the Rasha, the Navi who tried to curse Klal Yisrael. He says, Bilam, who is chashuv, right? Who is important in the world to come? In other words, Rabbi, remember again, sometimes you can't. This world, Rabbi say, has a lot of smoke and mirrors, and so sometimes the people who rise to prominence in this world are not good, right? Are not solid people, but they rise to prominence for a whole variety of reasons. True good only comes out in the world to come. So Onkelos in his journey wants to know in the world to come who ultimately is held in high esteem. Amrlei Yisrael. Bilam says Klal Yisrael. Malud Bukibu. So now Onkelos says to Bilam, I'm thinking about converting. What do you think? Amrlei Lo Sidrosh Shlomam V'Tovosam Kol Yamim. No. Do not do anything good for Klal Yisrael all the days. Amalei. So Bilam will say it's incredible. The idea of here also is you see that these people, these identities of Titos and Bilam remain entrenched in their hatred even in the world to come. Amalei Dina Dahu Gavra B'mai. So Onkelos says, Bilam, what's your story in the world to come? Amalei B'Shichvas Zera Rosachas. Ultimately, again, I am in boiling semen. Not good, right? So boiling semen, I will say, now what's the pshat with that? Rashi points out this was Mida Kineged Mida. Remember again, I will say, Bilam, after he fails to go ahead and successfully curse the Jewish people. So remember again, he tells Balak, what does he tell Balak? Lure the Jewish people into the abyss of immorality, right? That leads with the rampant immorality with the daughters of Moab, which then leads to the entire story of Pinchas. So I'll say, I'm sorry, not Moab, Midian. Right? So I'll say, so ultimately, again, so you see that for it's a Mida Kineged Mida. He lured them into a web of immorality. Therefore, his punishment is to spend eternity in boiling Shechvas Zera. Azal Aske ben Agidla Poshe Israel. So I will say, so you can see again, so really Onkelos is really doing his homework in this, right? And he's really trying to figure out, should I convert or not? So who does he summon up? Now he summons up a Jewish sinner. That I will say, interestingly enough, here, the Gemara does not give the identity of who this was. But this was a big sinner, right? This was big stuff, right? So far he's right. He's gone to Titus, he's gone to Bilam. Now he goes ahead and summons up some Jewish sinner, but a big Jewish sinner. So the Gemara goes weiter. Good. So he called right. Amar chashav alma. So who is chashav in the world to come? Amar le Yisrael, Klal Yisrael, Malad bukebu. Should I convert? Amar le Tovasam drosh ra'asam lo sidrosh. Absolutely. Kol anogia bahen kilo nogia b'avas eno. Only do good for the Jewish people. If you try to harm Klal Yisrael, it's like sticking your finger in your own eye. Since we'll say that it's clearly a detrimental act, so ultimately, again, so too trying to adversely impact Klal Yisrael is negative as well. Calling it good. Amar le Tina dehu garva b'mai. Ultimately, again, so he says, so Onkelos says to this particular Jew, sinner, right, a real sinner. Ultimately, what's your judgment? Amar le b'tzor rosachas. I spend my days in boiling excrement. Okay, so as I see the Gemara says, "Damar mal kol malak al divrei chacham nido b'tzor rosachas." I'm saying here's what's interesting. So apparently, this individual, his particular sin, I will say, was he disparaged halacha. Specifically, he disparaged the rulings of Chazal. And therefore, the Gemara says, whoever goes out and disparages the words of Chazal ultimately spends the afterlife in boiling excrement. We'll say all of these punishments are considered to be Mida Kineged Mida, right? Titus tried to go ahead, reciprocal. Titus tried to go ahead and escape divine judgment through cremation and scattering his ashes, so he's judged that way. Bilam tried to destroy the Jewish people for immorality, again, boiling semen. Apparently, this last individual who was disparaging of the words of Chazal, so we'll say, so essentially, he treated Chazal like as lowly as excrement, and therefore, again, his punishment ultimately, again, is in boiling excrement as well. Ta'chazi, the Gemara just makes an observation, I will say, first of the widest lines, Ta'chazi ma bein poshe Yisrael lenevi umos ha'olam, of the Avodah Zarah. So also listen to this, the Gemara just points out something very interesting. You see the difference, though, between Jewish sinners and Gentile sinners, right? Or ultimately, again, to the prophets of the Gentile world. How so? So you're both saying the Gentile sinners remain entrenched in their animosity towards Klal Yisrael, even in the afterlife, right? Titus still hates Jews in the world to come. Bilam still hates Jews in the world to come. This particular Jewish sinner, as much as he rebelled against Jewish authority in this world, in the Olam HaEmes, he accepts the reality or the greatness of Klal Yisrael. Incredible idea. Tanya, Amr Belazar, Bare Kam Gidola Kocha Shabusha. So now the Gemara closes out the story over here of Bar Kamsa. You see from here the power of embarrassment. Sharisiya Kadosh Baruch Hu as Bar Kamsa, V'hechrev as Beiso, V'saraf as Heichalo. Both say, listen to this. So what's the power of embarrassment? Because of the embarrassment that Bar Kamsa suffered at the hands of the Balabayis, what happens? HaKadosh Baruch Hu helped him to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. Now, as I say, this is a very strong statement. Remember, Bar Kamsa, as much as he has this whole plan to turn the Caesar against the Jewish people, the plan only worked. Why? Like every other plan in life, only works. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses to bless the plan. The Rebbeinu Shalom blessed the plan of Bar Kamsa. Now, obviously, I will say that's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu had in mind to destroy the Beis HaMikdash, right? That was the punishment for Klal Yisrael. The fact that it comes through Bar Kamsa indicates to us the negative, detrimental power of humiliating another Jew. That the humiliation of Bar Kamsa was the vehicle of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. I'll say, what a profound and overwhelming statement. You see from here the power, the destructive power of humiliating another Jew. For the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash was brought about through Bar Kamsa. Incredible. Tarnagola, Vatarnagolta, Charif Tur Malka. Suppose that the city of Tur Malka, which is in Eretz Yisrael, was destroyed because of a rooster and a hen. So the Gemara says, what's the pshat with this? Davanehigi kavo mafki chasne v'kalsa mafki kamayo tarnagola v'tarnagolta. We'll say an interesting practice. Whenever a couple was getting married, they would go ahead and they would put a rooster and a hen in front of the chassan and kala. Right? Why? Kilomar Peru or Ravu kitarnagolim. It was like a bracha, right? Just like the rooster and the hen procreate, so chassan and kala, you should procreate as well. Okay, Yom Achad, one day, Havakachalif Kudna Dramai. So there was a group of Roman soldiers. Shaklinu Minayu. So I'll say, so what happened? So the Roman soldiers are there. The Roman soldiers see the rooster, right? The rooster and the hen. What do they say? They say, lunch, right? Lunch. So they go ahead and they take it. The Jews were so incensed about what occurred. So what did they do? Nafalayu Rachanu. So they killed the Romans. They killed the Roman soldiers. And I both said, obviously, very bad idea, right? I will say, what you see the common denominator amongst many of these stories is a non-measured response, right? I will say, so much of life is things happen, and I will say, in the heat of the moment, you're ready to react in such a dramatic way. I will say, what is life all about? So much of life is about counting to 10 before you respond, right? Because if you count to 10 before you respond verbally, before you respond actionally, so often the response is so much more measured and level-headed. So here, they didn't like, the Romans took the rooster and the hen. They killed the Romans. Terrible idea. What happens? Mardu b'cha Yehudai. The Jews rebelled against you. Asa alayhu, and therefore again the Caesar marched against it. I will say why? Because of the rooster and the hen. Literally, the city of Tor Malka is destroyed because of an unmeasured response. Because Jews reacted too quickly and too severely. It will say this comes down here. Bar Kamsa, unmeasured response. Tor Malka, unmeasured response. We'll say so many problems in life is because we react emotionally instead of reacting in a measured response to the situations in life. Incredible. Shavabahu, Bar Deroma, Davakafetz Mila, V'katalbe. So I'll say the Jews had this guy, they called him Bar Deroma. Bar Deroma means he was the Jew of the south. We'll say this guy was able to jump a mill. Pretty incredible. Jump a mill, probably a bit hyperbolic, but you understand, jump a mill, and he was able to kill out Roman soldiers. So no one could ever catch him because he was like this, like this superhero who's jumping long distances. He would jump from place to place, kill Romans. So Shakli Keso Tage, Va'osvea Ara. Caesar took off his crown, put it on the earth. Amari Bono de Alma, Ribon the Amal Kulim. This is incredible. Caesar's talking to Hashem. Ribon Shalom. Kadosh Baruch Hu. Inecha lecha timsrei lahu gavra lididei. So Caesar says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, do me a favor. Do not don't deliver me into the hands of one man. In other words, you want to deliver me into the hands of an opposing army, opposing nation, that's one thing. But do not allow me to be defeated by one man. Achshale pume labar deroma. Probably will say, so it's incredible. So in this moment when Caesar is humbling himself before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Bar Deroma, this guy, right, this Jew from the south, is becoming a bit arrogant. And what does he say? He says, Va'amar halo ata elokim zenachtanu v'lo teitze elokim etzivasenu. He says, Kadosh Baruch Hu, you have forsaken us. You have forsaken us. Right? So essentially, Bar Deroma says, our victories come from us, not from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But here's the problem. David Nami Amrachi, but David HaMelech said this pasuk as well, yet there's no indictment for David. David Atmui Kamatame. David, when he said it, he says, "Hello, Elokim zelachtanu." So David HaMelech says that as a question. He says, "Hashem, why have you forsaken us?" Bar Deroma, this Jew from the south, had said it as a statement. God has left the building. I am responsible for our victories. So we'll say, as a result of this arrogance, what happened? Allah Beis Hakise. So this Bar Deroma goes to the bathroom. Asa darkuna shamte lekarkashe. So apparently as he's relieving himself, a snake came up from the pit, right? And ultimately again killed him. Amar hovis rakesh lenisa hazim nafkin ashakvinu ishavkinu shavkinu v'azal. I will say Caesar, realizing the incredible miracle that his victory was only because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, decided to spare the Jewish people this time. So I will say, so remember again, Caesar had marched on Tor Malka. Now as a result of this incredible miracle that killed this Bar Deroma, gave Caesar victory, Caesar decides to turn around. Is Dakar achlu v'shasu v'adliku shragi adis chazi biliyuna tigushpanka berichok mila. The Jews of Tor Malka began to celebrate. So right, Caesar turned around and they had such a celebration. I will say they were eating and drinking and they lit so many candles, literally again until the image of the signet ring was visible a mile away. Amar michtu kachadi beyudai. So the Jews are rejoicing over my retreat. Hadar asa ilahu. Caesar turned around and went back and killed out Tor Malka. I will say, it's all the same story, right? Be smart. The Caesar's at your doorstep. He retreated. You want to celebrate? You can celebrate. Perhaps better to have a little bit of a muted celebration. I will say it's the same dynamic over and over and over. A fundamental lack of restraint. I will say, remember again, this is second Beis Hamikdash. Why is second Beis Hamikdash destroyed? Why is second Beis Hamikdash destroyed? Sinas chinam, baseless hatred. I will say, how does baseless hatred manifest itself more than any way? Once again, lack of restraint. Someone does something to you, you don't like, what do? You give it right back to them. I will say, that was the story of Kamsa bar Kamsa. You give it right back to them. You don't, we'll say, life is about restraint. Someone says something to you, you don't have to respond in kind. Someone does something to you, you do not have to respond in kind. Right? The Romans kill your chickens, you don't have to respond in kind. The Caesar turns away, but he's at your doorstep. You don't have to launch a massive celebration. Be smart. Learn how to learn the art of self-restraint. It's the same story over and over and over. It's so tragic. I'm Rabbi Yassi. Tlasmia alfi shlifi sayafa. All Tor Malka. Let's say 300,000 Roman soldiers went into Tor Malka. The katlu bat tlasa Yomi with tlasa leilusa. They killed out the inhabitants of Tor Malka for 3 days and 3 nights. Ubahach kisa hiluli v'chagni v'lo hava yada hani bahani. But say Tor Malka was situated on a mountain. So the city itself spanned both sides of the mountain. On one side of the mountain, the Romans are killing everyone out. And on the other side of the mountain, the inhabitants have no idea what's going on. So Bala Hashem v'lo chamal eskol navas Yaakov ki yas Rabban Amar Rabbi Yochanan elu shishim ravo ayaro shayu liyanai amalka b'Har Melech. But we'll say Har Melech, which is another name for Tor Malka. It's the same place. There were 600,000 cities on this mountain of Tur Malka. So the Amrav Yehuda Amrav Asi Shishim Ravo Ayaras Hayoli Yanai Melech Bahar Melech 600,000 cities did King Yanai have on Tur Malka and Har Melech. V'chol Achos Hayuba Kiyotze Mitzrayim. And every city had as many Jews as left Egypt. Obviously, this is hyperbolic, right? Because these population numbers would be staggering. But the point where the Gemara is trying to highlight is Tur Malka. Just to understand the scope of the tragedy, Tur Malka was a major population center. Except for 3 cities which had twice the number of Jews who left Egypt. What were those 3 cities? Elohein, Kfar Bish, Kfar Shchalayim, and Kfar Decharia. Kfar Bish, why is it called Kfar Bish? I will say now, Bish means bad. To lo Yovi Beis Elush Piza. It was a very inhospitable place. Whenever visitors would come, they would never offer them lodging. Kfar Shchalayim, Shaitza Parnasas min Shchalayim. So Kfar Shchalayim, because again, they made their parnasa from cress. Shchalayim is cress. Kfar Decharia, both say Decharia means is zachar, is males. So why is it called the city of males? I'm Rabbi Yochanan in the show saying Yodos Zacharm Tchila, because ultimately again the women would often give birth to boys first. Ve'aled that's Nekeva Bachrona, and then would give birth to girls afterwards, uposkos, and then ultimately would stop giving birth. Amar Ula will say this is what to speak about on that because the Gemara said, well, okay, let's go back to Amar Ula. The Didi Chaziyahu Asra, I saw this place. Afilu shisin ribusa kanilo machzik. So it says interesting. So Ula says, what are you talking about? You're making it like Tur Malka is this massive place with 600,000 cities, and each of them have the number of people who left Egypt. I saw Tur Malka. Tur Malka is tiny. You can't even fit 600,000 reeds in Tur Malka. Well, say, are your rabbis liars? They said Tur Malka was so big. You're saying it's so small. Are they lying? Amalei Rabbi says it's incredible. Amalei, when it comes to Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Tzvi Ksivba. Let's say Eretz Yisrael is called the land of the Tzvi, the land of the deer. What does that mean? Mat Tzvi Ze in Oro Machsek Espesaro. Af Yisrael Bizman Shavos. Listen to this. The deer is very unique. The deer, when you shecht it and then flay it, if you try to put the meat back into the hide, it won't work. The hide contracts after you go ahead and flay it off the animal. So to Eretz Yisrael, af Eretz Yisrael, bizman sheyoshvin aleh, when Klal Yisrael is in Eretz Yisrael, ravcha, the land expands. Or bizman she'in yoshvin aleh, when Klal Yisrael does not inhabit Eretz Yisrael, gamda. Ultimately, again, it contracts. So we'll say, what a profound statement. There's a bracha in Eretz Yisrael that when her children, Klal Yisrael comes into the land expands. The land somehow has the ability to accommodate the entire population. When Klal Yisrael leaves, the land contracts. Rabbi Yomi bar Chilkiah, Rabbi Chilkiah bar Tovia, Rav Huna bar Chia, Haliyah Sviga be'adadi. These rabbis are sitting together. Amar, I'ika d'shmiya le milsa mikfar sechanya shal Mitzrayim. Lema. If anyone knows anything about the inhabitants of Kfar Schanya, right, in Mitzrayim, about their piety, say it over. So listen to this. I'll tell you a story about the piety of the people in Kfar Schanya. Both listen to this story. There was once a story of a man and his arusa, right? So this husband and wife, but they only had erusin, not kiddushin. They were taken captive by Ovdei Kochavim, now taken as slaves, they were told to procreate, right? Because remember again, the offspring of your slaves increases your slave population. So Amralosh, so the wife said to her husband, here's the problem, they only had erusin, they never had any suin. Al tigabi, do not lay a hand on me, she'ein li ksuva mimcha, because I don't have a ksuva from you. So she said, it's not right. It's not right for us to be intimate with each other because I don't have a ksuva. Without a ksuva, again, Chazal or metakin, that a man should not live with his wife without a ksuva. V'lo noga ba ad yomoso. And he never laid a hand on her until the day they died. I'll say, Ukishemes amra lahen. When this man died, his wife, his widow, said to the people, here's how you should eulogize my husband. I'll say, it's incredible. Amra lahen siptu lazeh shepit beit b'yitzra yosem mi Yosef. My husband, this man, he reigned in his desire even more than Yosef HaTzadik. Dila b'Yosef lo hava elachad shaita. Yosef was only tempted for one at one time. V'hai kol yoma v'yoma. My husband lived with his temptation to be intimate with me every single day. Yosef lav bechada mita. Yosef did not have to sleep with Eshes Potiphar in one bed. V'hai bechada mita, but my husband slept with me in one bed. Yosef lav ishto. Yosef was not tempted by a woman who was his wife. She was someone else's wife. V'hai ishto, and yet we technically were legally married. I will say it's incredible. Right? So we'll say, talk about just the piety of these Jews. Pasach idach va'amar ma'isa va'amdu arba modios b'dinar. We'll say there was a story. Also, it sounds like also in Kfar Schanya. So what happens? There was a story that one time again in Kfar Schanya, right, 40 saw of wheat could be bought for a dinar. Nechsar ashar. Something happened, the price changed, and you were only able to buy 39 saw of wheat for a dinar. So something happened. But so the people of the town recognized that that must be reflective of a diminution in the spiritual standing of the residents of the town. They found that there was a father and son who had violated Nara Murasa, betrothed girl, on Yom Kippur. They saw there was a lapse of morality in the town. They brought them to Beis Din. They were stoned in Beis Din. The prices were restored back to what they were before. So there was a story ultimately again of a man who wanted to divorce his wife. But he couldn't. Why couldn't he divorce her? She had a very large ksuva, a very expensive ksuva. Ma'asa, what did he do? What is his interesting plan? What does the guy do? Halach v'zimin eshoshvinov, the echlina v'hishkan. So he invited over his friends. What did he do? He gave them to eat, got them drunk. V'shkivan amita achas. He laid them down on the same bed as his wife. V'hevi lovan beitza. He brought the white of an egg. V'hitel b'neihem. And he placed the white on the bed in between his friends and his wife. Now let's say, what was he doing? So it was a setup. He was trying to make it look like, right, that she committed adultery. What happens if a woman commits adultery? What happens, I will say? Loss of a ksuva. Divorce and loss of a ksuva. The Hamilam Edim, he brings in Edim. He says, Edim, look, I don't want to make any accusations, but look what happened over here. So I'll say, what happened? Ubala Beis Din. Ultimately, again, he brings her to Beis Din. There was one of the people on the Beis Din there, was one of the elders from a student of Shammai. Ubava ben Buta Shmo. His name was Bava ben Buta. Amr lahen. So I'll say, Bava ben Buta says, I have an interesting Masorah. Kach mikublani mishamai hazakin. So we'll say, remember, semen could look a lot like the white of an egg. How do you tell the difference? Lovan beitza solid minaor. So I'll say this is very interesting. So the white of an egg, when exposed to fire, ultimately Rashi says solid is misyabish or miskaled. Literally, again, it dries up. It dries up. On the other hand, shichvas zera docha minaor. Shichvas zera flows away from fire. So, let's go to the scene of the crime and let's check the evidence. So we'll say what happens. So ultimately they found that it was the white of an egg and not semen. So they recognize again, I will say, they recognize what the husband tried to do. So we'll say they flogged the guy, made him divorce his wife because obviously he's not a good husband, and Lamaisa made him pay the ksuva. So we'll say the point of these stories is that clearly these Jews were incredibly moral individuals. Now, we'll say the last story is a story of immorality, right? But the point over here is that there was a system to go ahead and combat immorality. So, Rabbi Yosef says incredible. When we said, since these Jews were so pious, why were they punished with destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? I should say, of the destruction of their communities. Because I will say they did not properly mourn for Yerushalayim. Simchu es Yerushalayim v'gilu ba kol ohaveh sisu atam esos kol mis'adlon aleha. I will say, so apparently they were held accountable. So I will say these stories apparently occurred after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, after Yerushalayim was destroyed. These communities were destroyed ultimately because they did not properly mourn for the destruction of Yerushalayim and the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So I will say incredible. Ashka de Rispak Charev. So I will say Ashka de Rispak Charev Beitar. The city of Beitar was destroyed because of the side of a wagon. What happened on the side of a wagon? It was an incredible story. I'm sorry. Davanahigi ki haymisala yinuka shasli arza yinuksa shlasli turnisa. When a boy was born, they would plant a cedar tree, and when a girl was born, they would plant a pine tree. When this young girl would get married, so kaitsi lahu va'avdu ginana. It was actually a very beautiful minhag. They would cut down the tree and make the chuppah out of that tree, right? Out of that cedar and out of that pine. Yom achad havakachafa barte de Kesar. Itber sakar de rispak. One day the Caesar's daughter was traveling through town, traveling through Beitar, and her wagon broke down, right? The wheel in the wagon broke down. Katsu arzava ailu. Also, I'll say they cut down a cedar tree. They cut down one of the cedar trees, and they repaired the wagon. The Jews were so incensed about this. Nafol alayu machunu. They killed the Caesar's daughter and her attendants, right? All because they took the cedar tree. So the case, they came back, they told the Caesar, the Jews have rebelled against you, and Caesar marched on Beitar. This was the destruction of Beitar. So Gada Bechari Av Kol Karen Yisrael, Amr Bizir, Amr Rabbi Yochanan, Elu Shmonim Elef Karnim Mechama, Shenichnesu Lekrach Beitar. This refers well to the 80,000 soldiers. Karnei Mechama literally means, we'll say, those who carry the horns. Who carries the horn when you go into battle? Who carries the horn? Ultimately, again, like the commander of the group, right? So 80,000 commanders entered into Beitar. And they killed everyone. They killed men, women, children, till the blood, I will say, ran so thick that it ran all the way into the Mediterranean. Shema Tamar Krova Haisa, maybe you'll say, well, Beitar is close to the Mediterranean. Rechoka Haisa is more than a mile away. Tanya, Rabbi Elazar Hagadol Omer, Rabbi Elazar Hagadol Omer, Shnei Nechal Mi'ishva Bekas Yadayim. There are two streams in the valley, in the Bekas Yadayim. Echad Moshech Elach ve'echad Moshech Elach. One goes in this direction, one goes in a different direction. V'shira chacham shnei chalokim mayim ve'echad dam. We'll say when the city of Beitar was massacred, there was such a flow of blood that those streams became 2 parts blood to 1 part water. Others say the non-Jews in the area of Beitar, we'll say, were able to have their fields fertilized with Jewish blood for 7 years. For 7 years, they did not have to add any additional fertilizer because of the Jewish blood which ran through it. We'll say, Amr Beis, Amr B'chibar Avin, Amr Yoshua ben Karcha, Sachli Zakin Echem Anshe Yishalayim. One of the elders of Yerushalayim said to me the following: Bebikazu, in this particular valley, Harag Nevuzaran Ravat Tabachim Masayim Ba'achas Asara Ribo. So we'll say in this valley, Nevuzaran killed 2,100,000 people. Obi Yerushalayim Harag Tishim Va'arba Ribo. And Yerushalayim, he killed 940,000 people. Al Evan Achas, on 1 stone. Now we'll say the Gemara here is sensitizing us to this idea that when Yerushalayim was destroyed and the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, he'll say it was not simply the loss of a building. The catastrophic loss of life that came with the Churban was something absolutely staggering. Millions of people died when the Romans overran Yerushalayim and the surrounding cities. Listen to this. When the Nebuchadnezzar entered into Yerushalayim and killed out people, he killed so many people until the blood of the populace mixed with the blood of Zechariah. Now we'll say, what's the blood of Zechariah? So remember again, Zechariah lived a number of generations earlier. Zechariah was killed ultimately by King Yoash. Why was he killed by King Yoash? Because he was giving mussar to the Jewish people and rebuking them for their ways. They killed Zechariah in the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. Zechariah's blood remained bubbling in the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. They could not get rid of it. Nebuchadnezzar comes into Yerushalayim. He kills out much of the populace, till the blood of the general populace mixed with the blood of Zechariah. So what happened? So Nebuchadnezzar enters into the Beis Hamikdash, and he sees that the blood of Zechariah is bubbling. Amar my hai. He says, what is this? What is this? Amrulei dam zvachim dishtabach. And I will say, the Jews did not want to tell Nebuchadnezzar what this was because it was embarrassing. So they said, oh, it's just the blood of karbanos. So I see dami v'lo idmi. So Zechariah, I'm sorry, so Nebuchadnezzar said, really? Because I've seen animal blood before. He brought the blood of all different types of animals, and none of it resembled the blood in the mikdash. Amarle, he says, if you tell me what this is good, and if you don't, I will literally remove the skin from your body with combs of iron. He threatens them with violence. Amarle, my name of what should we tell you? Neviya Hava, ben Dahava Kamuchach Lamba Mili Dishmaya, Kaminan Ilu Vekatlina Le. This is the blood of a prophet who rebuked the people. The people didn't like the rebuke, and so they killed him where he stood. And it's been a number of years already, and his blood has not settled down. Amr Lahu, son of Uzaran says, Adam if I sinale. The Uzaran said, I will appease the blood of the murdered prophet. I see Sanhedrin Gedola, Sanhedrin Kitana, Katal Elai V'lo Nach. So I'll say he killed out the large Sanhedrin, the smaller courts, and the blood of Zechariah did not stop bubbling. Bachurim ubesulos, he takes young men, young women. Katal alayu, he murders them. V'lo nach. We'll say ultimately the blood of Zechariah doesn't stop bubbling. We'll say first of the widest lines. Tinoko shabes rabban, he takes children, he murders them. V'lo nach, and the blood of Zechariah does not stop bubbling. Amarle, Zechariah. Tovim Shabaheni Baratim, Necha Lacha Davinu Lakula. So Nebuchadnezzar says, Zechariah, I've killed out the best of Klal Yisrael. Do you want me to continue to murder Jews in order to appease you? So the Gemara says, Nach, the blood of Zechariah stopped bubbling. Bahu Shaita, hear tshuva b'daite. I will say, in this moment, Nebuchadnezzar had thoughts of tshuva. Why did he have thoughts of tshuva? So he said, Amar, Umaim al nefesh achas, Kach hu gaver the kadal kahani nishmasa alachas kama v'kama. But say Nebuchadnezzar has this epiphany. If so much blood was shed to avenge the blood of one Jew, of Zechariah, so Nebuchadnezzar said, what is going to happen to me now that I've murdered so many Jews? What is going to happen to me? Azal Arak, Nebuchadnezzar left his post, he ran away. Shadar Shtar Partasa Bebese, he literally sent a document back to his house about how to dispose of his estate, the Igayer, and he converted. You will say, is this not incredible? Right? Nebuchadnezzar, who is called Rabba Tabachim, he is called the chief butcher. The chief butcher ultimately goes ahead and converts. Tana, you will say, so other great people who converted. Naaman, who was the general of Aram, Ger Toshav Haya. He ultimately again becomes a Ger Toshav. Now remember, Ger Toshav means a resident alien, meaning what? In other words, he didn't convert to Judaism, but he did give up idolatry and observe some Shemes as Bnei Noach. Right? Nebuchadnezzar, Ger Tzedek, Nebuchadnezzar becomes an actual convert. Mibnei Banav Shal Haman Lamdu Torah B'Bnei Brak. Isn't that incredible? Haman had grandchildren living in Bnei Brak, learning Torah in Bnei Brak. Mibnei Banav Shal Sisra Lamdu Tinokos Yerushalayim. We'll say Sisra's grandchildren ultimately were Rebbeim, right? Taught children in Yerushalayim. Mibnei Banav Shal Sancheriv, the grandchildren of Sancheriv, Lamdu Torah Berabim, ultimately taught Torah in public. Who's that? Who had descendants of Sancheriv taught Torah in public? Man Inun, Shemaya v'Avtalion. Shemaya v'Avtalion. Hainu Dichsev Nasati Estama Atzachiach Sela Levil Taxos. So I'll say, but just as an aside, what's the pshat with this? What's the pshat with this? That the descendants of these terrible Rishonim ultimately again become Jews or become teachers of Torah. We'll say, remember again, what these individuals represented was dramatic hatred and animosity, which represents passion. Passion is the strongest of all midos. And if you could rechannel it in the right way, it becomes the source of all life growth. These people who caused so much destruction, specifically for Klal Yisrael, had this passionate hatred. So passion was embedded in their makeup. What do their descendants do? Rechanneled it in a passion not towards hatred for Klal Yisrael, but just the opposite, a love for Klal Yisrael. Which I will say, this type of message gives us the greatest amount of hope. Because often when we sin, I will say, we feel very terrible about ourselves. But recognize that often sin is just a negative manifestation of internal passion. If we could just simply rechannel it and repurpose it, there is no telling what we could accomplish. If the children of Sancherib, the grandchildren of Haman, could channel the hatred, the passion of their Zayda, then Allah has kama v'kama what we are able to do as well. Incredible. So Hakol kol Yaakov adayim de Esav. The voice is the voice of Yaakov. The hands of Esav. Hakol, we'll say, what does it mean the kol? And we'll say in this pasuk, really what the kol means is the crying out. Zeh adrainos kesar shagbalach zan shishim ravo. He killed, right? He killed 600,000 times 2. Kifayim kiyotzi Mitzrayim. Kol Yaakov ze Aspanios Kesar shaharag biyeser arba meos revo. Killed ultimately again. Shaharag bekrach Beitar arba meos revo. Ultimately killed 4 million people in Beitar. V'amrelei arba alofim revo. Others say 20 million Jews. V'aydaini de Esav. Zumachos harasha shechrivas basinu b'sarfa sechalinu v'glusamer atzenu. So what does it mean? The hands of Esav. This refers ultimately again to Rome, which destroyed everything. What does it mean kol kol Yaakov? There is no tefillah that is effective in this world that doesn't have Klal Yisrael involved. What does it mean the hands of Esav? There is no battle, I will say, that is successful, that is waged in this world, that does not have the involvement of Esav. Al naros Bavel. Shamya Shavnu. Say such a moving pasuk. Literally, on the banks of Bavel. That's where we sat and we cried when we remembered Tzion. Malamed Shiru LaKadosh Baruch Hu David Chorban Bayis Rishon v'Chorban Bayis Sheni. Well, says the pasuk can tell him. David HaMelech was shown prophetically the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash and the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. Chorban Bayis Rishon. He was shown the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash. Shne'emar Al Naros Bavel Sham Yashavnu Gam Machin Rabosai. So on the banks of Bavel, that's a reference to the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash. Bayis Sheni D'chsiv Zachar Hashem Livnei Edom Es Yom Yerushalayim. Bayis Rishon Shneimar Al Naros Bavel Sham Yashavnu Gam Machinu. Bayis Sheni D'chsiv Zachar Hashem Livnei Edom Es Yom Yerushalayim. Aru Adi Yisod Ba. So most I point over here is based on these psukim. David HaMelech is shown prophetically the destruction of the first and second Batei Mikdash. Rabbi Shmuel, Vitim Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Masti Santana. Both say this is an incredible story. Maise bedalad meos yiladim v'yilados. Both say it's an amazing story. There's a story of 400 Jewish children. 400 literally again. Dalad meos yilad v'yilados means either it can mean 400 boys and 400 girls, or a total of 200 boys and 200 girls. Shenishbu l'kalon. Both say this is by the Romans. They were taken captive by the Romans, and they were taken captive for degradation. Rashi points out, what does this mean? The boys were going to be used for homosexual behavior, and the girls were going to be exploited as for sexual behavior as well. So here, gishu ba'asma l'mahin misbakshin. Both say these children. It's children. 400 Jewish children. So I will say they recognized what they were being taken for. And I will say, now this story, they're taken captive on a boat and they're being taken to Rome to be exploited for immoral behavior. So Amru, so they asked us, listen to this story. Amru, im anu tovin bayam. If we throw ourselves into the ocean, right? Essentially, we take our own lives by throwing ourselves into the ocean and we drown. So, anu ba'in l'chai olam haba. Will we go to olam haba? I was like, do you understand the profundity of this story? If you notice, by the way, the names of the children, the details are not even mentioned. Do you know why sometimes in these kind of stories the details aren't mentioned? It's because stories like this have repeated themselves throughout Jewish history many times. When do you give a name and when do you give a location? When the story happened once. But when a story repeats itself so often over the history of the Jewish people, you don't say names, you don't say places, because it's representative. It's representative of a heartbreaking episode which has played itself out so many times. These children understand why they're being taken to Rome. So they have a simple question. If we jump off the boat and we drown, and we avoid this immorality, well, we have Olam Haba. So what happened? Darash lahen agadol shabahen, the oldest child amongst us, right? The oldest child says, Amar Hashem mi bashan ashiv, Hashem silos yam. The oldest child will say, quote of the pasuk from Tehillim Sameches. What does the pasuk say? So mi bashan ashiv, this child darshans the pasuk. He says, mi bein shine aryeh ashiv. Hashem will bring us back from the mouth, from between the teeth of the lion. Mimtzulos yam. What does it mean? From the depths of the sea. Elu shetovin bayam. This refers to those who drown in the sea. Even those who drown in the sea, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will recover. So this oldest child says to the other children, even if we are lost in the depth of the sea, the Ribono Shel Olam will retrieve us. Kevad Sheshamu, we'll say, Kevad Sheshamu Yilados, Kach, when the girls heard this, Kaftzu Kulan. Ultimately, they all jumped overboard. V'naflu sochayam, and they fell to the depths of the sea. Nasu Yiladim Kavachom Be'asman. So the boys are left on the boat, and the boys make a Kavachom, and what do they say? V'amru, Mahalalu Shedarkan Lekach. See, we'll see, this is incredible. The boys say, the girls, they were going to be exploited. But listen to this. They were going to be exploited, quote unquote, in a normative fashion. What does that mean? What does that mean? That they were not going to be subjected to abnormal, immoral behavior. So lekach, sedarkan lekach, anu she'in darkinu lekach. We are going to be exploited in an abnormal, immoral way. Alachas kama v'kama. Af heim kafzu l'sochayam. The boys jumped overboard as well. V'alei makasav omer ki alecho ragnu kol hayom nachshavnu kitzon tivcha. I will say, what an overwhelming story. 400 beautiful Jewish children jump overboard in order to avoid exploitation and immorality at the hands of their Jewish captors. I will say, I just want to point out, you read a story like this, sometimes we face challenges in life, and we don't know, do I have the requisite koach to be able to face my challenges? I will say, these are our ancestors. This is the nation we come from. This is the strength that's embedded within our religious DNA. The ability to stand up in the most difficult of times and make the most difficult decisions. This is Klal Yisrael. This is who we are. Rav Yehuda Amar Zu Isha Arabasinot. We'll have to stop over. Let me just give you the coming attractions. I will say the Gemara says Zu Isha v'Sheva baneha. This refers to the story of the woman and her 7 children. But I will say this story appears a couple of different times. Well, it appears twice. Once in the Gemara and once in Medrash Eicha. So we'll say we'll stop here for today. We'll start with the story Meretz Hashem tomorrow about the story ultimately again that becomes known as the story of Chana and her 7 sons. We'll say we'll stop here. Overwhelming Gemara. Shkoyach. All right, Kavra on Zoom, have a great day, everyone.